Yeah, hi, I'm Pam Nickelty. I reside here in Fresno. Not big on public speaking, but I need you guys to hear me out here. For the last 10 years, I've resided here and I've watched the skies as these planes have gone over. Put these lines in the sky. I'm 55 years old. I know a contrail from chemicals. I want to read to you some flyers that I'm going to leave for you all to read. They've been given to you before, along with some movies that I don't know that you've looked at. But we are in a worldwide crisis, and you guys can sit up here and deny it all you want. I'll be back to every board meeting. You're going to start seeing a lot of me. Government officials and geoengineers are proposing to spray 10 to 20 million tons of toxic metals in the skies over the heads of you and your families. These chemical aerosols are intended to slow global warming. I need everyone to stop and think about what you're breathing. Do we really have a global warming problem? Yeah, I believe that we do. But is it worth your family's health to put this stuff up in the skies? Is it worth listening to me or Sam Chaney or anyone else? Excuse me, sir, giggling isn't funny to me right now. This is very serious to me. Lab tests have disclosed extremely high levels of these metals in the rain, groundwater, and atmospheric tests worldwide. They are doing this without your informed consent. Has anyone here voted for them to put this stuff in the skies that we're breathing and our children and grandchildren are breathing? If you are, I want you to stand up. That's what I thought. Blood and urine tests reveal alarming levels of aluminum, strontium, barium, cadmium, and other chemicals known to cause cancer, asthma, Alzheimer's, headaches, skin disorders. I'm over here. Could you guys pay attention to me, please? I'm right here.
Ma'am, you might
What?
just make the message. Okay, thank you very
It's
much.
affecting your, well, if you're not looking at me, I don't know you're listening. It's affecting your immune systems. Your immune systems are in decline. Look around at your families and your friends, your coworkers. Do any of you not know somebody who's sick? If you do, stand up. Muscle weakness and much, much more. I have pictures of the inside of airplanes that I'm willing to share with everyone. Inside these chemtrail planes, there are tanks. On these tanks is a patent number. Write this down. Patent number 7413145. Systems and methods for aerosol dispersion of materials, filed by none other than our CIA. Google it, Evergreen Air, the CIA.
Thank you very much.
Also human-produced aerosols, and those are things like soot. You can very clearly see the emissions coming out of things like cars and trucks and ships and wildfires. And so why do we care about these aerosols and how are they influencing our climate? Well, we were brought into this in 2009 by the California Energy Commission because it was believed that the snowpack was going down, the amount of precipitation we were getting was decreasing. And at the time, people were thinking that it was the local air pollution in California that was seeding the clouds. Basically, if you don't have aerosols, if you don't have aerosol particles, you do not have clouds. And so at the center of every cloud drop, at the center of every ice crystal is a particle. But not all particles seed clouds the same. It depends on what they're made of. And so different sources are more efficient. Some sources are more efficient at seeding clouds than others. And the bottom line is at the time when we came into this project, it was believed that we were putting too many seeds into the clouds. And so when these particles go into the clouds to form a cloud, there's only so much water available. And if there's too many seeds, you make many, many tiny drops, but they can't grow big enough to fall into rain. And so it's believed that in areas where humans live, where we're producing more of these seeds, we can actually turn off our precipitation in those regions. And so I had been involved in looking at, we developed a tool that lets us look at what the sources are, and so we started flying this instrument through clouds as part of Cal Water to try and determine what were the actual sources that were leading to this change in precipitation. And as I say, we came into it thinking it was going to be local pollution, and as I'll mention in a minute, we actually found out that there were a few surprises along the way. One thing I want to mention is one of the key ingredients in precipitation is actually ice formation. And when you talk about ice being formed, it is really, really finicky as far as what it likes to form upon. In the atmosphere, only 1 in a million particles on average will actually give you an ice nucleus. And that's kind of the magic switch that enables a very efficient precipitation process. So in flying through these clouds, we're also sampling the ice crystals and the cloud drops one by one and trying to understand what was in them. So this is just a quick schematic that just shows the two scenarios. When you have too many seeds going into a cloud, you end up with many, many tiny droplets, and you can shut off precipitation, versus clean conditions where you have less seeds, you have fewer droplets, so they get much bigger, and they will precipitate more efficiently.
Kim, if I could add just one point to that. If you look at like the satellite images showing dust coming across the Pacific, you see that they're in fairly wide swaths. If you think about the human scale, these are hundreds of miles wide. To get man-induced seeds spread out over an area like that is not something that's traditionally been very feasible. I doubt, maybe it's going to be very tough to do, but I think Mother Nature has done a remarkable job in seeding these clouds in large areas right when we need it, right when it's most efficient. And I'm saying that partly because there was a study called the Sierra Cooperative Pilot Project some decades ago that looked for several years with lots of resources at whether cloud seeding worked or not in the Sierra. And the lead scientist for that concluded that Mother Nature was remarkably efficient. When there was an opportunity to seed clouds, Mother Nature seemed to take care of it. So there wasn't a lot of margin left for people to make a difference. Now that's still a hypothesis. There's a lot of work to be done. But I would say we're learning a lot more about when those opportunities might be there that could make things more efficient.
Aircraft making a condensation trail is very similar in many ways to when you go outside on a cold day and exhale, you create a condensation trail. That little cloud is a condensation trail. Now, if you take a 2-mile walk on a cold day and you can turn around and you can see your condensation trail tracking all the way back for 2 miles. That's how crazy it is to think that what we're looking in the sky is actually condensation trails.
The contrails, not the chemical, the contrails occur because of cold air, minus 30. It takes high altitude, around 30,000 feet plus. There's carbon dioxide and water vapor in that exhaust. That turns to ice crystals, and that's what you see, the white stream behind it. Those white crystals of ice warm up, dissolve, and the smoke goes away. And it never lasts more than a minute. What we're seeing now, and I first could not believe it, and I started looking at the skies, and these are not normal. They're not natural. There's something going on. I don't know who it is or why they're doing it. All I can testify is it's not natural and it's not normal. It's got to be some outside influence doing that. Thank you.
I'm here to give you testimony that chemtrails, they're not contrails, are indeed real. They're spraying almost every day. I watch the clouds and watch the spraying program going on. I want to tell you that we're in very great danger from the pollution that's coming down over us. And we've been led astray by the military-industrial complex, and they're responsible for the cloud's creation and weather manipulation programs. They're dark operations. That's why they're not out in the media.
I look around and I see people are starting to look up and see this. Many times I've spoken about chemtrails, and I get this blank look on my face. What are you talking about? I'm saying, look up. As a pilot, before I fly, I look up. And so, boy, they're really out there working.
When you look up at the sun and you see a white haze, that is aluminum floating in the air right now, and it's coming from the aircraft.
There's a huge amount of aluminum being found because these sprays have aluminum, strontium, barium, manganese. And there's a lot of argument that aluminum is very common to be found. But aluminum is only common in a bonded form. It's not common in a free form, and we're finding high rates of free aluminum in the soil, which is not natural.
The metal compounds that are being used are environmentally dangerous. We need to be monitoring them. We need to be testing them.
Okay, these previous guys, I've watched exactly what they do, and yes, they are correct. I've seen exactly the same stuff, so ditto marks on those. You want some figures? Okay, latest water test, tested the rain. 13,100 micrograms per liter of aluminum in the rain in 2013. Normally, it should be 0. So 13,100 is pretty damn much, folks. It used to be 0, then it was 100s in the 2000s, and then since 2010, it's into the 1,000s and the latest 13,100. In the snow on Mount Shasta, pristine Mount Shasta, 61,000 micrograms per liter, 4 times the amount that is found in the soil up there. Where in the hell is this stuff coming from if it's not coming from the soil?
We have clouds in the sky we've never seen before. Almost every day I'm seeing clouds I've never seen before. And NASA has been even named a few of these new clouds. It's really interesting, but NASA is a corporation. I want you to know that.
NASA has also conducted a research program in what they call metallized fuels. We're actually putting aluminum oxide right in the fuel because it has 2 atoms of aluminum and 3 atoms of oxygen. So during the combustion process, it releases all that oxygen and dramatically increases efficiency, but it leaves the aluminum in the air.
We got things coming from sky down, and it's a huge, huge problem. Because as it comes down, what happens is a couple of things. Is that it actually is in our air, we breathe it. And as we breathe it, it's actually going to go up through our nostrils, into our brain, easiest access to our brain frontal lobe. The contaminants that have been identified, which already been mentioned, are aluminum. Aluminum is the #1 free radical generator to the brain to cause early apoptosis, which is early death of brain, and it begins to set off the scar tissue, which we call the amygdalin, which is part of the chemical matrix related to Alzheimer's.
I'm a neurologist practicing in Reading for 17 years, and in the past 5 years, I have seen the number of patients with Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's, and other neurodegenerative diseases tremendously increase, almost quadruple.
I became interested in Chem Trails about 8 years ago when I was in Hawaii, and the Hawaiians are really being very vocal about it. I concur about the increasing number of Alzheimer's. They have been able to take the aluminum and micronize it, which means it'll stay up longer. But it also means, and I don't know if any of you have noticed some metallic taste in your mouth when they're spraying, but you inhale that, it goes up through your cribriform plate and through your sinuses and into the brain.
As you heard, to spray nanoparticles, very small particles. These nanoparticles, they basically trigger a programmed cell death in the brain, and that is the ultimate path we see in Alzheimer's.
That's problem #1, because when we look at the Alzheimer issue, we say those are the old. The real problem is, and the real scare I have, is as I am a father of 2, I am a grandfather of 3. So the drama is our children. ADD started in the 70s. Autism was not on the radar. There was no documents, there was no information. It was 1 in 100,000 children. Today, what we have is 1 in 48 boys. I was part of the early group that was looking for aluminum in ADD and ADHD. And all of those children that started to develop those phenomena had high levels of aluminum. When we figured out protocols to detox them out, to free the body of those particular contaminants, what happened is that their brains came back. When we do this to the age, it doesn't come back as quick, but it will come back. But I'm seeing Alzheimer's in 56 years old. Back in the 70s, Alzheimer's when you were 80.
If you remember 8 to 10 years ago, there was this big move to get rid of aluminum from underarm deodorant because it would cause Alzheimer's. Look what they're doing to us now.
I want to give you a little bit of history on the background behind nanoparticles has been described before. A nanometer is 1/1000th of a meter. It's very small. In fact, if you have particles, say, that are 40 or 50 nanometers across, you can take and line 50 of them up next to a single red blood cell. These things are extremely tiny. They're pervasive.
The collapse and decrease of agriculture is something I worry about even more than the previous info about autism and Alzheimer's.
Believe me, I'm seriously concerned with what I'm watching. As a wildlife biologist, I've been watching the ecosystem collapse. When you lose all your stream organisms, when you have aluminum overload in your streams, you're killing your microbial bacteria and you're disrupting the entire ecosystem. So it goes way beyond just a little bit of pollution. How did Monsanto No, to create aluminum-resistant plants. I don't think I've heard anybody ask that question. Okay.
Insects. I've done studies in Siskiyou County. They're at 20% of normal. The aquatic insects basically made a nosedive in 2006 to about 20% of normal. So far this year, I've sampled 200 trout stomachs. 98% of them are empty. So sorry about the trout fishing, fellows. The mayflies, stoneflies, dipterus, and caddisflies are damn near gone. The terrestrial sampling is down to about 20% of normal, except for pest species like ants. We're seeing a loss of the major bird species, and as the gentleman said, the ecosystem is unraveling, and Audubon's been telling you that for years.
The materials that are going into the environment right now, aluminum oxide nanoparticles and barium nanoparticles, these just happen to be the same materials that they use in nanothermate explosives. And so when this stuff settles down out of the air into the environment, it is small enough to be absorbed through the root structure of the trees in the forest. And so when there's a forest fire, and there will be a forest fire, those fires burn dramatically hotter. The point is that the cost of firefighting, the cost in the healthcare system have nearly doubled in the last 10 years. The amount of acreage is lost because of fires. The impact on human health is dramatic.
I personally tested water and aluminum, and I found aluminum had 47 times the normal expected amounts. Strontium had 10 to 20 times the amounts. Barium was 20 times. This is what the stuff looks like here. Collected, it looks, most people just think it's a cobweb, but I tested it, it has outrageous amounts of barium, strontium, and aluminum, but they destroy the sample, so I'm not letting this get away from me.
You know, these tests are international in scope. We're seeing this all over the world, guys. Okay, pH of acid soils is 20 times more alkaline. The aluminum in the soil has doubled in the last 10 years. The rain normal was 5.6. It's 20 times more alkaline. Aluminum blocks essential nutrients. I am unable in my garden to restore normal pH, and that's because nanoparticles are now in the circulatory systems of both plants and humans.
The Air Force conducted a study starting in 1993. It was called In Vitro Toxicity of Aluminum Nanoparticles in Rat Alveolar Macrophages. That's a real fancy way of saying testing the effect of aluminum nanoparticles on the white blood cells in the little air sacs in your lung, the alveoli. And what they found in this 8-year study was that these particles, when you're exposed to them long enough, it suppresses the ability of your white blood cells to defend you from airborne infections coming into your lungs. So it suppresses your immune system. But they also found that these same particles, once they get into your system, they can actually go through the barrier in each one of the cells. They get inside the cells, and these particles can actually suppress the ability of mitochondria, which are in the cells that help to gobble up toxins and things that would be harmful to the nucleus and the reproduction process of the cells in your body. These processes are suppressed, and so essentially by breathing this material in, your immune system is dramatically suppressed.
I wrote to the federal government because Air Force wrote a book, and on the first page of the book they said, we're going to control the weather by the year 2025. I asked them, what are they doing spraying these chemicals on the public? I said, there's violation of United States Code 50 USC 1520, which prohibits the American government from experimenting on the U.S. citizens with chemical agents. I said that law also requires who's ever experimenting, when the federal government does it, that they have to report to Congress within 30 days. They wrote back, they said they don't know what I'm talking about. We have enough evidence that there's this spraying going all over the place.
We were warned about the takeover of our freedoms by the military-industrial complex by both Eisenhower and Kennedy. They're gaining traction on us, folks. We are in trouble more than just a spraying program.
All I can say is it's about time we get up in arms about this, because it is affecting our health. It's high time that we as citizens of this great country take action.
Board of Supervisors in Suffolk County, New York, they outlawed geochemical engineering. Hawaii passed an ordinance prohibiting geochemical engineering. I urge you to bar geoengineering in Shasta County and pass an ordinance. At least ask some damn questions. What the hell is all this aluminum doing here? Why are the trees dying? Fishes dying? Why is there Alzheimer and aluminum spiking? And why are these fibers on the ground here in Shasta County? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marmon. Today, the Shasta County Board of Supervisors has been the beneficiary of some sincere, passionate, and knowledgeable comments. And I thank you for those.
So Bill Gates is officially backing climate scientists who are lobbying for large-scale geoengineering projects to combat global warming, whether you believe that CO2 has anything to do with global warming or not.
My name is Scott Stevens. I was a television weatherman for 20 years. These chemtrails are absolutely required to impact whatever weather event they were designing. And the trails were an absolute necessary ingredient for them to achieve their weather modification goals. So we're finding the aerosols, the metal particulates, the weather engineering, whether it's scalar, ionic, or orgone, or the chi of the atmosphere. All of those can be used and leveraged to create weather events that are several standard deviations or outside what would be typically normal. Before jumping on the chemtrail bandwagon I needed a motive. Without a motive, you can't say what they're doing and why they're doing it. You have to have a motive. So the agenda was drought. The agenda was to kill the storm, at least in that one particular spot. You can kill a storm in place. That's easy to do with HAARP. You just change the polarization, you change the ionization of the atmosphere, and the storm will fall apart. And so it's very easy to add those particulates of aluminum, barium, and whatever else they want to put in there. And as you add heat to that, those particulates then radiate the heat into the atmosphere and it warms. Let's just say the storms can develop more violently, more quickly, in places that are not necessarily as where you would expect them to be. And we've got technologies available to us now that can do, continent-sized projects. Is all of the persistent trails behind it. So that tells me, Michael, that they are engineering this storm to a great degree. Now all of this stuff is chemtrail debris or chemtrail clouds that had been laid down over Utah and over southern Colorado earlier in the day. And if you control the weather, you're going to control the planet. It's that simple. The work we're doing will provide cover for others to come out. And I'm most interested in whistleblowers.
Hi, the subject of chemtrails keeps coming up, or at least came up while I was beginning my research on weather modification. I wasn't even a believer that they actually existed, that there was a trail separate from the regular condensation trail, and those trails being the chemtrails. And then we would have days like this. We end up with a milky white sky with persistent trails. And this didn't happen just once in a while, but would happen fairly frequently. These days would occur most often before a storm would come in from the west. And in classical meteorology, that's okay because that's where the moisture arrives first, at the higher levels, at those beginning levels of cirrus. And so you'd expect if you've got jet trail up there seeding the sky, you're going to get contrails of some duration. What set these days apart was that the balloons, the radiosondes that go up would come back reporting humidities 20%, 25%, 30%, way too low to account for the persistentness, the long duration of these contrails. So that led some people to believe that there was something else up there when we're talking about chemtrails. The man who whose work I first came across, his name was Clifford Carnicom, and he was down in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Again, the desert Southwest, you've got dry skies for, 9 months of the year. Again, with interludes as storms would move through there in the winter and also during the summer monsoon season. But even in Idaho, where I first became aware of the chemtrail phenomena, the skies were generally good for 100 miles visibility. On days like this, as you can see, we could probably count a half a dozen trails where the plane has been there and has left a trail which has resulted in the sky becoming cloudy. And I promise you, if we go look at the Denver radiosonde or the Cheyenne one just up the road here, we'll find that the humidity is less than 40%. So these trails should have persisted for less than 1 minute and likely less than 10 seconds.
Here's our discontinuities. That break right there, and along this trail, we see other breaks. Here, where the trail rolls over, got a wavelength, and then another break there. So this spot from there to there denotes a wavelength.
For me to come in and get on board the chemtrail phenomena, that conspiracy that I was honestly a little uncomfortable in jumping aboard, I needed a motive. I needed to know why these planes were up in the sky. There was talk and lab reports that there were biologicals, that we were looking at heavy metals, that there was this whole chemical concoction that these planes were spraying, and that is a very different mixture than water. I don't mind breathing water vapor. This stuff might be a different story. And when we begin to see the opacity of the sky changing so profoundly, I needed to know why. So I did something, took a little money. I took some webcams. I bought some Logitech Orbit webcams, little $99 things, hooked them up to a little computer and pointed them at the sky and let them grab a picture every 5 seconds, and then at the end of the day would render a movie. And it took 4 months before I began to figure out what the planes were doing up there. If we look off to the southern sky, you can see a group of those trails all together. And my discovery was that these planes were up there outlining the sky. Outlining the sky so that the weather makers can apply their electromagnetic solution, their HARP solutions, their solutions to change the weather. If you can add a particulate to the sky, you can apply heat to it. That heat is going to radiate or decay into the atmosphere. And if Lieutenant Colonel Bearden is right, and these beams are bidirectional, meaning you can drop energy into a zone or you could pull energy out of the zone, then I would find these trails in and around all significant weather events. We would find them around hurricanes. We would find them around tornado outbreaks. We would find them around snowstorms. We would find them over top of heat waves. So within any of the weather that is manipulated or modified by these weather makers, we would find trails. And as I continue to look into this chemtrail phenomena, many nations were observing, seeing these chemtrails overhead. Up here, just below the sun, we've got a patch of cloud that continues to brighten up. That area of cloudiness is growing. It has been outlined by chemtrails. So these chemtrails are acting as a targeting, an alignment mechanism. So from space, you can deposit energy at very specific layers in the atmosphere. The other thing they can do is that the trails act like a water or a drop of dye in moving water. Much like if you go into your doctor's office for an MRI, magnetic resonance imaging, they flush your system, your circulatory system, with barium so they can see how it works. It gives them a way to look inside your body. Barium is barium and aluminum are some of the primary components that we're seeing with these trails in the skies and these chemtrails. Again, this happens before and during major weather events. My chemtrail photography has kind of evolved over the years. I started with this $99 Logitech webcam. When I was seeing the chemtrails flying, the detail, the texture in the clouds just was not being picked up by these cameras. So I ended up going with a high-definition Panasonic, and this is just a beautiful, beautiful camera. Lets me lock it in at infinity and pick up some of that beautiful texture that when you see these electromagnetic tools beginning to stimulate the atmosphere, whatever way they want to do, I was finally beginning to pick that up visually so I could share it with you. Something that surveillance of the sky has afforded me over these past 4 years is the ability to pick out which planes are commercial and which ones are not. For a long time, and there's still even this misconception on the web that the short trails planes are regular commercial craft. This is not so. We see the long-lasting trails, the marking chemtrails, as I have called them, because they are simply out there marking the sky. They leave this thin wire, this thin metallic wire, and then it deforms. It changes shape as it moves through the atmosphere, is caught up in the atmosphere. They don't always, however, move with the clouds. I have seen on numerous occasions clouds, actually the chemtrails, moving through the clouds coherently. And this would not happen with the regular condensation trail. Another way of discerning which are chemtrails and contrails are the atmosphere, the meteorological targets that these planes fly through. You will see a deformed area in the trail off in the distance. We have the flat trail, it rolls, it dips and then rolls. These shorter trail planes will come along and mark precisely, with incredible precision, right where that trail breaks. Again, measuring where we have a discontinuity in the flow of the atmosphere. That's important. You won't get a United, an American, Southwest plane interested in the trails out ahead of them. These are chemtrail flights, and there are many, probably half of these weather modification flights leave no trail at all, making them very, very difficult, other than where they fly through the sky, to discern if they're commercial or a chemtrail flight.